This week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry with agriculture broadcasters Orion Samuelson and Max Armstrong, and featuring agriculture meteorologist Greg Solier. This week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Case IH and your local Case IH dealer. Coming up on this weekend's broadcast, we'll talk a little bit about America's pork industry. What's going on there? Hello, everyone. We welcome you to our visit here. You see, I'm at the desk by myself, but that doesn't mean I'm alone. Mr. Mike Pearson, we want to have some market coverage from you momentarily. We'll come to you for that.
Yes, indeed. We'll be talking to Bill Biederman of agmarket.net here in just a little bit about the volatility in these markets, Max.
And indeed, in the weekend ahead of World Pork Expo, we'll come to you for some insight there as well. Well, let's talk about farm policy for a couple of minutes here. What's going on in Washington with the policy editor for Farm Progress. That includes Farm Futures and the various state magazines and websites of Farm Progress. Jacqui Fatka joins us here this weekend. Jacqui, it seems like there's a news release out of Washington every day, especially USDA. There's just one after another. Some dollars going here, some dollars going there. There's a lot of money being doled out these days.
Definitely. A lot of this money is still some of the money from the pandemic funds that we saw from last year and appropriations, but definitely a lot of money coming out to try to help prop up the ag industry for sure.
Now, will that make the farm bill less meaningful? There's another one to be written over the next few months, to have one by the end of 2023. Is all of this money coming out here in advance going to make the farm bill less impactful?
You know, I think the Farm Bill always has a very important role to play. And, you know, we talk a lot about the safety net and having something that provides certainty. And I think the big items in the Farm Bill, the crop insurance, and really also the conservation programs, those are big components within the Farm Bill. And I think that they're going to continue to be very important. I know that last year they tried to prop up some more conservation funding through the Build Back Better. That was not able to be accomplished, but I think a lot of support to try to increase the funding for conservation funding. And also we've seen a lot of disasters. And so this Farm Bill, they're going to try to figure out, is there a way to create a permanent disaster program to benefit the ag sector that maybe pairs with crop insurance?
I'm smiling just a little bit here because there's been talk about this, as you know, for a number of farm bills. Get away from ad hoc disaster assistance, throwing out money for every disaster that comes along, working it into the farm bill, getting a good crop insurance program that will take care of that. And it hasn't, it has been elusive, it seems, over all these years.
You know, I think that it will continue to be that way. I think there are opportunities to, you know, what we found with the WIP program, the Wildlife Hurricane Insurance Indemnity Program, was to kind of come alongside and with those who did have crop insurance, you know, provide just a little bit of extra for that shallow loss. And, you know, I think at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we keep farmers in the business and doing that in a way that doesn't maybe give them a disadvantage or, you know, an advantage. You know, we just need to make sure that we are providing that safety net. And so, yes, it's elusive. I think the price tag is probably the hardest in figuring out a way to write it. But I think if there's a way to write it where it's flexible enough, and that's something that Secretary Vilsack said at a Senate hearing here recently, of making sure that whatever program is written by Congress within the Farm Bill, making sure that it's not so prescriptive that it maybe doesn't address some of those different you know, a wildfire that might have happened right in the middle of Kansas, or an area that maybe had drought, but maybe not quite as much drought as others, but still was impacting to those producers. And so figuring out a way to make sure that they are flexible and able to be able to help where it's needed most.
Midterm elections loom large out there. There has been talk in advance, of course, about the possibility that the balance of power could shift in the House. If that were to happen, how does that change the dynamic here in writing a farm bill?
Well, I think definitely if the House flips to Republicans, you're going to see a different priority from Glenn G.T. Thomas from Pennsylvania, who's the ranking member right now, the leading Republican for the House. I don't think we'll necessarily see maybe the big fight over nutrition spending that we did in the last farm bill. I do think, though, he has a different approach to how to fund especially conservation programs, actually having more options of maybe getting more of a public-private partnership and letting even your small mom and pop shop, as well as your General Mills, kind of put money into a big pool of money for conservation. And so that's a bill that he's actually kind of championed through the House. And being creative, we know that we're going to be in some tight fiscal times. And so whether we might see some more, depending on the private sector, to come alongside to create more of a partnership between the government, especially when it comes to conservation funding. I would expect that could be a different approach as we look at the House if the Republicans take over control.
Jacqui Fatka, thanks for joining us this weekend on the broadcast. We appreciate it. Policy editor at Farm Progress.
This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone Ag. The Firestone Ag Dealer Network offers you the support, inventory, and resources you need. Visit firestoneag.com to find your local certified dealer. And we're talking markets with Bill Biederman, partner at agmarket.net. Bill, we're heading into the summer month, and that means investors change where they put their money. As the calendar turns to June, how is the money flow changing in the world of ag commodities?
Well, Mike, it's interesting because typically at this time of the year, we have a lot of speculation going into getting the acreage mix, and this year is, of course, no exception to that. And then all of a sudden we have this, oh my God, I didn't think they'd ever get it planted, sell-off. And that's very typical at this time of year. And we're seeing that now, and we're just in that time of year where we start seeing the corn grow, and the guys that are playing golf outside the Chicago suburbs are like, hey, I didn't know there'd be corn growing now. And so we see the sell-off, and we've seen the funds liquidate a massively long position in just the last couple of weeks. So we suspect that will turn into a more stable situation in the next couple of weeks coming forward, and then we'll start to trade summer weather. Right now, the big drought we had is not as big, right? Because we got all that rain. And North Dakota went from a severe drought to a pretty significant flood. So a lot of weather has corrected itself. And so it's going to take some time to dry out if that's what we end up doing.
Bill, you mentioned the weather and the struggles we've seen getting the crop in the ground this year. As you look ahead to this next report from the USDA, do you anticipate planted acres to go through any substantial changes?
So that's a really good question. And USDA is not going to change any acres, most likely until the June report, but traders will, because that's what we do. And 89.5 million acres. The real question right now is how many acres were picked up in all of the I-80 states, because north of I-80 up into 94, of course, we all know that there was a lot of acres that did not get planted. Right now, Mike, most of the south of 94 and North Dakota down into South Dakota, we believe that 90 to 100% of that got planted. But north of that, which isn't your great corn growing areas, but north of that, we think there's about 1 million acres that did not get planted to corn. So the question will be, did that million, maybe 1.4 million, did that get made up in these other states? Right now, it's hard to say, honestly, because of the fertilizer prices and the difficulty in getting logistics. We're guessing it probably did not. So we do suspect an eventual decline in acres. And that's really critical because not only did they have the 89.5, another assumption is that we'd have a record yield. And right now, we're not too sure that either one of those assumptions that USDA made are correct.
As you think about this next supply and demand report coming from the USDA next Friday, Bill, are they likely, I should say, in your mind, to make any more adjustments to yield either on corn or in soybeans?
I don't think yield will be adjusted yet. I think it's just too early to know. I mean, could we have a record yield in both crops? I don't think so, based on the way it went in. We slammed a lot of stuff in wet soils, and usually, when you plant in the mud, your crop's a dud, so they say. And but I think it's too early for USDA to make that change. Where I do think they will make some changes, Mike, is in demand.
Where do you see those changes happening?
Well, okay, so like feed use to us has been a big contention because we've got massive numbers of animal on feed, grain consuming animal units. And so we think that feed use number doesn't have any downside room in it at all, maybe a little bit of upside. They did a nice job of bringing up that ethanol number, the other report, but they took that up to 53.75 for oak crop, which is certainly justifiable given everything we see that's going on in ethanol and the profitability of it even to today. But they drop it down to 5,200 or 5.2 billion bushels for the next crop, for next year. And that just makes no sense to us. And same with the exports. The exports are 2.5 down from 2.7 for the oak crop corn. With all the problems going on in the world, we've got a 14 million ton shortfall that has to be made up. We think we can contribute a little bit more out of the U.S. in those numbers.
Well, let's talk exports more when we return with Bill Biederman of agmarket.net. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone Ag. Harvey Firestone invented the first pneumatic farm tire, forever changing what it means to farm hard. Visit firestoneag.com to learn more about this history and tire solutions for today. And we're back talking markets with Bill Biederman, partner at agmarket.net. Bill, just before the break, you mentioned this rise in exports for U.S. ag commodities that should be coming. Do you think it's going to happen this summer, or will it take until later in the year?
We absolutely think it'll happen this summer. So, Mike, if you go back to last year's crop, USDA had a 2.7 billion bushel export number. They dropped that down to 2.5 for the crop year that we're pulling out of the bin, and down to 2.4 for the new crop. I mean, how can that happen when all of these food shortages that they're talking about are occurring? So, let me just tweak the numbers for you just one little bit. If I go to 2.5 billion and I just take that up to 2.6, my carryover drops. And then if I go into the new crop and I carry that same number in, you're looking at a carryover that's down to 1,200. And now, Mike, if we don't have a record yield, even if we get all those acres planted, let's just take 2 bushels off the record and go to 175. We're down to a 1.1 billion, which is below pipeline requirements based on all the latest USDA data. And if I take it down to the kind of a yield we had just a couple years ago, a 168, we're looking at a carryover that's only 500 million. So we have to start with a base set of assumptions, which we've done. And between now and next January, we could see a lot of revisions by USDA, starting with demand. And then as we get into July, August, Sep, we're going to be talking about yield and acreage.
Bill, in order to capture that export market, we've got to be competitive. Our prices have to be competitive on the global scene. Is that possible with the value of the dollar continuing to climb?
Well, we're not very uncompetitive right now with South America. So in soybeans, they are a little bit more competitive. In corn, when you figure the freight demerge problems and all things like that, we're pretty competitive. So we don't really see that as going to be the biggest issue. And the big thing about the dollar is we're at a historically high end of a range. Don't really see it getting much higher. I don't think the world or the feds want it to go a whole lot higher. If anything, if we were to back off a little bit, that would relieve a little pressure and make us more competitive at the same time.
All right. Will we get that with the Fed raising rates, though, Bill?
Well, that would depend on how the other countries around the world respond. So if they start raising rates quicker and faster, which, the European Central Bank is talking about doing that, money will flow back that way also. So it just depends on how the world competitiveness of getting a return on your CD and your 3-year bonds is going to work out. So, we got a long ways ahead of us. And the other thing too is, just the cost of doing business as a corporation is going up, and the Dow, I think, is going to continue to put pressure. That could be good for commodities, right? As money moves around. But,
all right.
Let's see.
Things could always be changing, folks. That's Bill Biederman of agmarket.net.
Chad Colby's look at agriculture technology comes your way next, brought to you by the IBM Watson Decision Platform, combining AI with Internet of Things data to help agribusiness increase yields, improve quality, and drive sustainability. Chad Colby loves his tools. That's no secret. He has a whole wall full of them. There's one he's zeroed in on specifically. You may not need that massive air compressor.
We definitely love to talk about our power tools on our tech segment. And this week, it's a brand new tool from Milwaukee. It's the highest capacity, I would say, air inflator that they make that doesn't have a tank. And the neat part about this one is it's got some serious performance. Now you can see on the back of the machine, it's got a 36-inch line, which is super handy. So it'll reach any tire, or, if you got to fill up something else like a basketball or beach ball or something like that. But the real world is it's got some pretty good components inside that allow you to inflate tires over 100 pounds of pressure. You grab your M18 battery, which a lot of us have, it just slips right in the device, and you're in business. After you power this thing up, what I really like about it is it has, I guess they call it true fill technology. You put in the desired pressure. You can see me right here. You can do it, 1 PSI at a time, or if you hold it down, it does increments of 5. And when it gets there, it has an auto shutoff feature, which is great. So to find a good example of how this works for you, here's what I did, is I unflated one of the tires on my pickup truck. And you'll see here in just a moment, I let the air down to maybe 8 or 9 pounds. It's essentially almost flat. I've got it set at 45, and basically I'm just going to push the button here. Now, in the interest of time, I'm not going to let it take the full amount of time it would take to fill it up here on our tech segment this week. So I'm going to use a little time lapse here. I'm going to speed up that process, but I really like how this thing worked. The nice part is with this technology too, it allows you to have some PSI presets in there. And it's very small and compact. You can see it easily handled the load of taking care of my truck. And here it is right here. It's closing in on 45 pounds. Once it gets there, the unit shuts off. I can tell you this, Max, you want to talk about something handy to have, in your pickup truck or at home in your garage so you don't need that big bulky air compressor. I love this tool. It's technology like this I can really get excited about. And Max, sorry, this tech segment might have cost you.
Hopefully Colby will be there with his new compressor when you have a flat. We'll take you back to a farm in Iowa as we continue our Plant Smart, Grow Smart series a little bit later here. Well, it's a privilege this weekend to welcome into the broadcast an old friend, a guy I've heard a long time on the radio. Say something to us, Wayne Shepard.
Well, what should I say to illustrate my voice? I don't know, Max. What do I do?
So many people across the country have heard Wayne Shepard over the years, your first-person broadcast, and many, many others, generally on Christian radio stations, coast to coast. Oh, and
a couple thousand stations.
Other countries, too?
Yes, of course, yeah.
One thing I wanted to talk with you about is what's been going on in Ukraine. You chair the board of something called Mission Eurasia, and you've been working in Ukraine.
Yes, Mission Eurasia is a Christian ministry, and it's my privilege to serve as board chair. Of course, we have a president and a wonderful staff, but as board chair, I wanted to make the trip myself because the donors have been so generous, just overwhelmingly generous to this project of providing food and medicine and much more to the victims of the war, that I wanted to go myself, Max. I wanted to see this operation in activity. I wanted to see firsthand. I wanted to put eyeballs on it. I wanted to be able to report back to those donors, and I wanted to look our staff in the eye and say thank you, because these are folks who are victims themselves. They are separated from their homes and their families, and yet they are serving other people by providing food and all.
Bringing food in, also in those packages, God's Word is there too, is it not?
A Bible is in every box, that's right.
We sometimes forget the power of the mission field, and I think back over history, the role that missionaries have played, not just bringing the faith, but also in actually affecting governments and politics.
Yeah, many of them do this around the world, whether it's providing fresh water or food. One of our partners at Mission Eurasia is Feed My Starving Children, and this group feeds millions of people around the world through partnerships like Mission Eurasia. So we're very grateful. Mission Eurasia has been in this field of the former Soviet Union countries for like 30 years. So we have built up a network of churches and contacts and relationships that now other organizations are coming to us and saying, you've got the relationships, you've got the network, you've got the logistics. we're going to partner with you to get this done.
We've seen the horrific images, and especially those of agriculture come to mind, seeing a tractor that was bombed. We know the livestock have been slaughtered and stolen. Mines have been put in grain silos.
Right.
There was a picture of a rocket that had penetrated the ceiling of a farmer's milking parlor. Yet, is there some hope? I mean, do you find folks there who are still managing somehow to be upbeat and encouraged by others coming in from other nations?
Yes, indeed. I was in Western Ukraine. We were in a safe pocket, if there is a safe pocket in Ukraine. We were in the far west. But in that place, all of these displaced persons from other parts of Ukraine, the Donbass, Zaporozhye, Mariupol, they've all come to the western part of Ukraine. So I had a chance to sit and talk with probably 100 or more people. And the impression that I'll always bring home to my mind, Max, is the fact that they would tell me their stories of harrowing escape through checkpoints and Russian gunfire and all.
One could imagine in that kind of a situation, I'm surprised to hear you say that, because one could imagine that as all of this is coming at you, as the devil himself is launching this at your country, at your people, at your family.
This is pure evil.
That you would look up and you'd think, Lord, what are you doing to us here?
Right.
What's happening here?
Right.
Why have you turned away from us? And one could imagine easily people turning away from their faith.
Right. No, just the opposite's happening. We are getting reports of people coming to faith in God because of this crisis. We have more requests for Bibles and Christian literature now than we've ever had at any time in our ministry. Now, our building was destroyed. We had an office building outside of Kyiv in Irpin that was destroyed by Russian tanks. And then they took the warehouse full of Bibles, the Russian army, and they piled them up into a bonfire and burned all those Bibles. But you know what? We have printed 10 times more Bibles since that event than we had in that warehouse. And they're all going out, hundreds of thousands of copies of Scripture. And so people are coming to faith. I have story after story of that.
With the magnitude of this, does it sometimes seem like you're using a garden hose on a forest fire? I mean, it has to be just overwhelming.
Yeah, it is. It is. But you know what? The people who receive the help are so grateful. They really are. Now, we provide boxes of food. You can imagine, and by the way, that food is assembled by our staff in the western part of Ukraine, even in Poland and Moldova. And then it's put into box trucks. We purchase box trucks with donations from our listeners and friends. We purchased these trucks so that we could drive the food into the war zone. I met a pastor. His full-time job now is driving a truck in and out. He'll drive 1,000 miles round trip to deliver a box of food. Food, medicine, baby needs, personal hygiene.
We have only about a minute left here. Here's your opportunity to make that sales pitch.
All right, okay.
Mission Eurasia is what it's called, right, Wayne?
MissionEurasia.org is the website. And we're so grateful for each and every donation because, as I often say, Max, we cannot outgive this need. Even if the fighting stopped today, and it's not going to, this fighting is going to go on for a long time, but even if it were to stop today, this need is going to go on for a long time. And now with the blockade of the Black Sea and grain exports cannot be made out of Ukraine, hundreds of millions of people around the world are going to be affected by this.
Thank you for sharing the story with us, Wayne. We appreciate it. Nice to have you in with us.
Thank you, Max.
Wayne Shepard joining us this weekend on the broadcast. MissionEurasia.org is that website in case you'd like to visit it and find out more and perhaps even in your own way contribute to the cause. It is a massive undertaking over there by all means, but there's that opportunity. It appears to make a difference. Stay with us. There's more coming up here. This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Case IH. Welcome back here to this weekend's edition of This Week in Agribusiness. We have enjoyed so much farm visits over the years. I was thinking about the geography of our visits everywhere from North Carolina to Arkansas, Minnesota. This weekend we go back to the state of Iowa for our Plant Smart, Grow Smart visit at Longview Farms. Let's talk about your operation in terms of your corn fungicide usage. What do you do here?
So we are an operation that firmly believes in the benefits of fungicide and just in general taking the best approach possible. And so we want to always position our crop to give us the most yield. And for us, that's been using Veltima fungicide. We really feel that it helps us manage both the disease and other pest pressures that come, but also gives us more confidence come fall when it comes to standability and ultimately what we see on the yield monitor.
You know what can happen when Mother Nature is tough, and standability, you referenced that. It's important, isn't it?
When we think about standability and just the impact that the volatile weather patterns we're seeing here, whether it is a derecho like we experienced 2 years ago, or just a random windy day at fall, it is really a big issue that we need to manage. The other element for us, when we plant late maturity corn, and so there is a big degree of concern around standability just because we are tending to see a longer growing season planting those products. And in our minds, if we have the tools available to us, we need to consider using them, and in this case, Veltima has been one that's not only been available, but worked well.
How long has your experience with Veltima stretched?
So we've been working with Veltima as a product for, I believe, 3 years on a full-scale basis. It's really been one that we've really engaged well with and implemented across both our corn and soybean platforms, actually. We've committed to touching every acre every year, as well as trying to get it ground applied versus aerial, truly to put ourselves in as good of a position as possible when it comes time to harvest.
Just reflect back on your initial experience when you were using Veltima, and did you see immediate results?
We did. When we implemented the product, we immediately felt like there was clearly a difference in plant health. There was clearly a difference in just the visual appeal of what the plants looked like, and then ultimately the combine went across the acres and we saw the yield benefit. And it's not a cheap decision to put fungicide on every acre, we understand that, but for us, we've seen the returns come back to us every year, and so that's really given us a lot of confidence to just build it into the budget from the start.
Did you hear that? The returns come back, Scott says, and you can bet he watches that very closely. There's more on our Plan Smart, Grow Smart series by going to the website plansmartgrowsmart.com. Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead, presented by Pivot Bio Proven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot Bio Proven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com. Well, that subject of the wind has come up so much recently. One conversation after another, the farmer would say, doggone it, it's still awful windy out here. Greg, will that start to abate at all?
I don't think so. You know, we generate wind in a couple of different profiles, localized winds like breezes off the lake, and the heartland sense. We've got so much of a range from temperatures cold enough to generate snow at times. Of course, the heat in the southern plains and that temperature range also gets stacked up at height, so you tap into some of those mid and upper level winds, bring down the momentum, and there go the gusty winds from one direction or another. And it's a parade of weather systems, especially if we can tap into jet stream energy. You get these windier weather patterns no matter the time of year. One feature offshore of the Pacific Northwest. Note how these systems, as the week wears on, continue their movement with some shower activity here. Higher elevation snow still in the forecast. A chill for big sky country. Where skies clear, winds drop back. We're not done with frost here as well late in the season, and the next weather system generating showers and thunderstorms and some added drought relief for a change from the Missouri River on westward. Good news there, even a stray shower into parts of northern California, of which we may see that early in the week. Napa on northward, a drop off in temperatures into the valleys of California. Yeah, we're already tapping into the reserves off the Cascades and the Sierra, moisture-wise, the runoff. And note the thunderstorm activity firing up across the plains. It's been all or nothing with regard to drought relief there, especially west. East, it's been a different story. Way too much of a good thing. By the mid to late portions of the week, jet stream buckles a little bit. Note how this low winds up a little bit farther to the west. There may be some added drought relief in the worst areas, but coming at a price. Maybe severe weather potential in into the western high plains. Heat back into play, Max, for the central and southern valleys of California.
So for some of these intense storm systems we've had here of late, Greg, there's been quite a bit of advance advertising. I mean, a good 48, 72 hours in advance, a lot of confidence in these.
That's right. Maps and charts lining up, whether you rely on the models or you do it old school wise. And it's nice when you can get the two to marry up and agree and give you advance warning, especially in the severe weather sense. And boy, last week, you folks from the Twin Cities, Arrowhead on southward into the Corn Palace, got it pretty good. Unfortunately, it was severe weather potential and more rain too, standing water and flooding in some of these fields. Warm front here, low pressure across parts of the plains. Note how jet stream winds as the week wears on move parallel along with these frontal boundaries, and it's a sign of a wetter pattern here in the weeks to come. Central and southern Corn Belt, parts of the upper Midwest. Note the colder air and still a whimper of frost and freeze at the Canadian border for this time of the year, rolling into June. That is a bit late in the season. Testimony that there's cold air in position. Cold air makes rain at this point in the growing and summertime season. The heat, the hot ridge over West Texas, and severe weather as well back into parts of the southeastern plains. Well watered down here. Some added relief as the week wears on into the western high plains areas. And again, little change to the weather maps and charts. Upper level winds, couple of fronts strung up here. Cooler to the north. The heat down south, plenty of heat and rapid crop growth and development from the Delta on eastward in particular.
When the feds came out with their hurricane forecast the other day, what was your reaction to that? Do you sort of concur with the number of strong storms that could be affecting the eastern part
Exactly.
of the
It may be one of those years like we had a couple of years ago. We go right through the alphabet into the Greek alphabet here. The tropical Atlantic is warm. It's a La Nina year. The trade winds are weak, and there's already thunderstorm activity along the African coast. So we'll watch it here in the days and weeks to come. Here's a weather system and showers and thunderstorms for the Corn Belt. Cooler air on the move, and again, upper level winds back along these boundaries. Disturbances will track along them. Not all day rains, but from time to time, the showers and thunderstorms are certainly into play in an increasingly wet weather pattern. Tropics too getting kind of busy offshore of the Carolinas. Note the severe storms back in the southeastern plains, and as the week wears on, once again, scattered showers and thunderstorms, Delta on north and westward, and tropical weather perhaps lurking in the western Gulf of Mexico.
Greg Solier is back with his extended farm weather forecast for the country, presented by Pivot BioProven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot BioProven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com. Whatever the operation is, many farmers are saying we need a little bit of a break here. The rains just keep coming. Some want to be spraying. Some, Greg, still have crop they'd like to plant, of course.
That's right, and it's getting increasingly more challenging to accomplish all that, we think, here in the days and next couple of 2 or 3 weeks to come with cold air. Lots of it for the time of year through the Canadian prairie. The usual heat across the central and southern parts of the nation and Gulf moisture, and we wring it out in this fashion, an inch or two, maybe higher amounts for parts of the winter wheat belt. And note the 1 inch potential or more in the high plains areas coming at a price, maybe severe weather potential. Rains will be drenching in the Tennessee Valley, 1/2 to 1 inch over much of the Corn Belt, in particular where we got it good last week, or bad, we should say, upper Midwest and western Corn Belt. Some scattered moisture, northern California and across the East Coast as well. Things normal for the time of year, watching a couple of suspicious areas of low pressure in the Atlantic and the Gulf, Max.
Well, I should point out we'll be well into June Dairy Month, which is underway now. A lot of those dairy breakfasts on farms in big dairy states are coming back this year. Take a look at that week of the 13th for us.
Okay, so you want some comfortable air in mind. This is maybe just cold for June. Look at the degree, and this is well below average. Late season frost and freeze for the upper Midwest, some sliver of warmth over the southwestern part of the country. And look at the moisture plume. Some additional recharge, drought relief for the Dakotas, but additional planting delays. A good chunk of the Corn Belt, severe into the Ohio Valley on northward and mid-Atlantic regions as well. We'll keep an eye on tropical weather systems. It'll be a busy time of the year out there.
That week of June 20th, will there be any warmth coming in?
Well, welcome into astronomical summertime, by the way. The cold air retreats somewhat to the north, but note this buckle, this U-shaped configuration. Heat here and heat here. You know it's wet and stormy, and that is the story. Northern and central plains, much of the Corn Belt into the northeast of New England. We're keeping an eye here for lowering pressure. The western Atlantic. Look at the dry time. Texas back in the southwest.
As we head toward the end of June, will it feel like summer even in the northern eastern states.
Now, we'll try to get temperatures to moderate. That, however, applies to a good part of the central and southern Corn Belt. Some of that hot ridge, it's been suppressed all the way back down into Texas. We had it a couple of weeks ago, and matter of fact, last week as far north as the border trade. So it reestablishes itself here. Jet stream winds more west to east and trying to position back northward. But again, fair amount of cold for the time of year across a good part of the northern and northwestern sections of the country. So you know it's an active weather pattern. Still no sign of the monsoon season getting going. Hopefully that will with time, but note a little tropical system and feed into the worst areas of the drought regions, and severe as well. Many areas of the central and southern plains across areas of the Corn Belt. Dry time for the eastern states. Normal precip for much of the Delta down through Florida. That includes the start of the rainy season, and it is a wetter weather pattern into parts of northern California and the Pacific Northwest. So lots of moisture ahead, Max, here in the days and weeks to come.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, spotlighting another great American tractor.
It's a little bit different Tractor Shed segment this weekend. We feel compelled to help you with some ideas for Father's Day. You know, the clock is ticking. Max's Tractor Shed is brought to you by Store Lock Tool Cabinets. Well, now, that might be a Father's Day gift. However, we suspect he'll want to make his own choice of cabinets, but you could go to the website, print out some of those pages, everything that's available from StoreLock, storelock.com. We have a good friend who has turned out some outstanding products about tractors. Lee Cloncher at Octane Press has some new books. Well, here's one I want you to take a look at. First and foremost, he has the Half Century Show Book and the Half Century of Progress video. And those are from last year's show. Those are sold by Octane Press at octanepress.com. Now, here's that new book, the big new book on John Deere evolution. Lee Cloncher is far and away the best author and photographer of tractors. He does extensive research, just as he did for John Deere Evolution. That book, Red Tractors, is still available too, with a foreword written by Max Armstrong. There's a book called simply Tractor, all kinds of tractors, not just red or green. That's available from Octane Press. Classic Oliver tractors, Sherry Schaefer, who's done a superb job over her career researching the Olivers and other tractors too, is the author of that book. Caterpillar Calendar, that's another one at Octane Press. Go to octanepress.com. You'll get many Father's Day ideas to make him happy when that day comes soon. Let's go to Mark Stock this weekend for the report from Big Iron.
Max, the list of items continue to grow on bigiron.com, and our June 8th auction has a bunch of unique items. Late model equipment. Here's a 2020 Caterpillar 140 all-wheel drive motor grader selling in Cheyenne Wells, Colorado with only 747 hours. There's a 2009 Peterbilt 367 tri-axle truck with an L-Tech boom selling in Hennessy, Oklahoma. B&J Cattle are retiring out of Richmond, Kansas. They're selling a John Deere 4440 tractor and a Case 2870 four-wheel drive. We're going high in the sky with a 1966 Cessna 182 Skylane airplane. This plane will be selling with the logbooks and all of the maintenance records. Check out the Case IH Patriot SPX 4260 self-propelled sprayer selling in Thurston, Nebraska for Alvin Sunderman. There's a Caterpillar D5G LGP dozer selling in Quincy, Michigan for Handy Excavating. A 2015 International ProStar semi-truck selling in Arkansas has the Cummins ISX-15 diesel motor. Plus, hundreds of other sellers will have their equipment sold on bigiron.com.
We do love talking about FFA here on This Week in Agribusiness. That's why we'll go to Kentucky this weekend to visit with a young man who's been the state treasurer of the Kentucky FFA. And I say that you're almost a has-been, aren't you, Austin Randolph? Your days are numbered as a state officer, correct?
Yes, we're actually here in the home stretch. In just a little bit over a week, we'll finish up at our state convention in Lexington and hang up our association jackets for the last time.
That will be an emotional time, I can imagine. What a wonderful year this has had to be for you, traveling around the state of Kentucky and being a part of those chapters.
Yes, it's been a phenomenal year. I always say that I went into it with the mindset of that I wanted to impact FFA members from all across the state. And now that I reflect back on the past 12 months, it's definitely been the FFA members who have impacted me. Just the connections I've been able to make with all of them have been something that I will forever hold near.
There are so many career paths that someone involved in FFA can take, especially an individual such as yourself who's been involved in leadership. What do you plan to do with your life, Austin?
Well, what I plan to do with my life, I am currently a freshman, or just finished up my freshman year rather, at Murray State University studying agribusiness economics. And with that, I plan on going into ag retail, or would potentially like to work for a commodity group here in the state of Kentucky.
You think you might want to stay fairly close to home there?
Yeah, I would like to stay within an hour or two of home, not get too far away, but also get out and branch out just a shade bit.
Murray State is a great school with a great reputation. But I gather, in addition to the learning you want to bring out of there, you want to be able to interact with farmers and others in the state and really have an active role with them on a personal basis.
Yes, definitely. And I'm actually going through an internship right now at a local ag retailer here close to home in McLean County, actually. And through that, I've got the opportunity to learn a lot, interact with a lot of farmers, and it's just been a great experience thus far. And I look forward to seeing what the remainder of the internship holds.
Bremen, Kentucky is your hometown, as I recall. What should we know about that community in Muhlenberg County, Kentucky?
Well, Bremen, Kentucky is a very small town with just a population over 125 people. But in my opinion, you won't find a tighter community. This past December, when the tornadoes came through, it wasn't 12 hours after they hit that the community was looking for ways that they could help their neighbors and looking for ways that we could start the cleanup process. That way we could make the rebuilding process a lot quicker and get back that sense of normalcy within the community.
It's had to be interesting to have a front row seat for all of that, one could imagine. Austin, thank you for visiting with us and sharing with us your story. Good luck in the future and have a great state convention in Lexington.
Well, thank you, sir. I greatly appreciate it, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you. Austin Randolph. The past year, he's been treasurer of the Kentucky FFA. Well, we promised you earlier we'd spend a little time this weekend talking about the hog industry in the United States, the pork producers, how they do, and that particular segment of agriculture has ripple effects elsewhere, by all means. Mike Pearson, we know that the World Pork Expo is just around the corner. You'll be there in the week ahead. And this is an event that at one time was open to the public. The public was encouraged to come in. It's a little bit different now, isn't it?
It is. It is. Obviously, biosecurity remains a top concern of the hog industry, especially as African swine fever has continued to spread around the world. But Max, the World Pork Expo is still the place to be if you're in the hog industry. Listeners, it's going to be happening June 8th through the 10th, and it happens at the Iowa State Fairgrounds in Des Moines. And it is quite an event. Max, as you well know, this is attended by folks from the U.S. hog industry, to be sure. There are scientists, there are meat scientists, there are folks on the pork side of the ledger, but it's also a place that we see the international hog community come together. And now that's what's exciting about the 2022 World Pork Expo, Max. In the years past, particularly last year, due to that patchwork of COVID requirements and rules for international travelers, the international attendance was a little bit down at the 2021 Expo. This year, as a lot of those restrictions come off, there are a lot of expectations that some of that international crowd might return in force because the hog industry has certainly been making headlines around the world, Max.
You know, there was a time when World Pork Expo moved around. It would be in Iowa, indeed. It would be in Springfield, Illinois, and it was also in Indianapolis, Indiana at one time at the state fairgrounds. But Iowa makes so much sense. That state is far and away the largest producer of hogs in the country, is it not?
It is indeed. And as a native Iowa boy, grew up on a hog operation, that industry is very, very close to my heart. But Max, you're exactly right. Iowa is sort of the epicenter here in the United States for pork production. North Carolina, of course, another top contender. And then the states that round out the Corn Belt. So there are, I think, a key component of the attendees at World Pork Expo will be coming from those areas. But Max, as we look at the hog market over the past several years, it has been international demand that has been driving a lot of these really strong returns. Prices in the lean hog futures markets, that lean hog price we quote on This Weekend in Agribusiness, has been elevated for the past 9 months. Now it is starting to come down, and I've got a feeling at this year's World Pork Expo, we will be talking about this pullback in the price of hogs that we're seeing happen as we head into the summer. But by and large, demand still looks very, very good. And as I talk to people in the industry, Max, as I'm sure you do as well, there is a lot of enthusiasm for the meat industry as a whole as we come out of coronavirus and the coronavirus lockdowns around the world.
Is the strength of the dollar a part of that story? Is that perhaps weakening the foreign demand at least a little bit?
You know, it is. I recently had the chance to have a conversation with Dan Halstrom, and he's the president and CEO of the U.S. Meat Export Federation. They track the export of all the meats that come from our shores heading to foreign countries. And he said that, yes, it certainly is. As we see the value of the U.S. dollar climb relative to currencies from other parts of the world, that makes our goods more expensive to buy in those countries. And the dollar has been on quite a tear. It's been reported that the U.S. economy is the best house in a bad neighborhood. We're the safe haven. Folks are moving their dollars to the U.S. That's elevating the value of the dollar. And yes, Max, that makes getting our exports out the door a little bit harder in this era when prices of everything are climbing so much higher.
We'll look forward to your reports next weekend, sir. Thanks. Have a great week. We hope you'll join us next weekend, too. We'll be looking for you. In the meantime, have a good, safe week. So long, everyone. Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Kubota. Shape your world. This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Case IH. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by Omax Communications in association with 22 Creative Group. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.